What's up everyone, Thralls Metal here once again. I'm Necrotic Nick and I have an album review for you. So one that I had my eye on this week was the newest offering from Fit for an Autopsy, Oh What the Future Holds. This comes out on Nuclear Blast Records again on the 14th of January. This band formed in 2008 in New Jersey. This is their 6th full-length album and, well, this is deathcore, but it's deathcore with a lot of other elements. These guys have kind of slowly been evolving their sound, and I mean, they've had a lot of member turnover, so with new members comes a lot of different influences and input in terms of song structure. But one of the main constants with this band is guitarist Will Putney, who is also the mixer and producer of this album, and I believe he did the last two. So his input has been there since day one. Now, generally, I'm not the biggest deathcore fan, but after I heard their last album, Sea of Tragic Beasts, I was actually pretty impressed. It definitely shows a clear evolution in their sound, embracing more atmosphere, clean vocals, more melody, but of course still holding on to the deathcore tropes that are still pretty much all over this release, though I think these guys kind of went off in some different directions on this one, and what you get is a very interesting listen. First off, I want to say Will Putney did a great job in the production. It is a very lush sounding album. The guitars are thick, bottom heavy, and chunky as hell. The drums have a great sound to it. The vocals, while I really like Joe's delivery on here, there's still a lot of layering and filters and tons of multiple takes to the point where it just seems a bit too much. But in terms of production, that's probably my only real gripe on here. So this opens up with the title track, which is essentially an intro, or I would actually call like more of a launching point. It starts off with droning ambience, of course, because droning ambience is kind of a huge part of this album, but then brings in pianos, clean guitars, the percussion starts to come in and gets gradually more intense, and then pretty much just explodes into raw, heavy deathcore. Joe's vocals, absolutely nasty, just a flat-out roar right up in front. And it sets up the next song, Pandora, pretty damn well. Pandora, though, I have to say, is almost more of a deathcore take on a melodic death metal song. This is pretty much like deathcore meets hypocrisy. The riffs are very catchy, heavier than hell, but there's a nice melody that rolls through. And this song is probably one of the few that I'd say is fast, like all the way through. Like it kind of has this fast, thrashy, mellow death beat to it, kind of breaks up on the choruses a bit. But that whole sort of mellow death feel on there was really interesting. And it does show up again on Collateral Damage, which I thought was really cool because they incorporated with some really more raw death metal riffs and like big chuggy triplets. So right away, hearing some more melodic death metal moments on there, I thought was already pretty interesting. But when you get down to tracks like The Man That I Was Not, Two Towers, and Far From Heaven, and no, Two Towers has nothing to do with The Two Towers, and Far From Heaven, though it sounds like a movie that Brad Pitt would star in the 90s and be predominantly shirtless in, it's also not that. Far From Heaven is kind of a Gojira song. Honestly, if someone had played Far From Heaven for me and not told me that it wasn't Gojira, I would have assumed it was Gojira. Even with Joe's vocal approach on this, the cleans kind of sound like Joe Duplantier's, kind of raspy, very layered vocal approach he uses on clean vocals. The harsh vocals are definitely a bit more harsh than Joe Duplantier's vocals at least are now, but this song is essentially built on those big syncopated grooves. It opens up with a cool crawling riff that is very similar to Gojira again. Actually, it kind of reminds me of stuff that was actually on Fortitude. And then this big stomping verse riff, which honestly is one of my favorite moments on this entire album. There's something about the groove and the power of that verse. It's just nasty. And then you get this really cool clean chorus. All of it kind of sounds more like Gojira than, Fit for an Autopsy. But at the same time, Fit for an Autopsy doesn't sound like Fit for an Autopsy when they started. This band has clearly evolved a lot, and again, you hear more of that. Now, Two Towers and The Man That I Was Not. These songs are very akin to Rivers of Nile. Probably more along the lines of the first three albums, not so much the new one, but it kind of has that interesting, like, prog, but atmospheric. There's still death metal elements. They do squeeze in some deathcore elements, though I think The deathcore is definitely played down in those songs. It's more just atmospheric death metal, and the song structure is very different. There's a lot more build-up of intensity, there's more clean vocals, definitely more melody, and those two songs are a little bit longer than the other tracks in here, so there's a little bit more room to kind of work in more musical creativity. And honestly, it can be a little bit polarizing compared to the rest of the album. The rest of the album is very deathcore centric, but again, you still have nods to other bands or other styles in there. A higher level of hate and conditional healing both remind us that deathcore loves Meshuggah, because these are loaded with kind of off-time polyrhythmic chugathons, lots of syncopation. Actually, the vocals kind of even go a Meshuggah route too, in terms of having like interesting cadences. And rhythmically, I think they're a lot of fun, though it does kind of labor the main thing in deathcore that I think gets repeated too much as breakdowns. Now, higher level of hate, I do like how it opens up with the tribal percussion, and then the guitars slowly come in and really kind of build on top of that. But it kind of just really latches on to that Meshuggah sound. Actually, it kind of sounds a lot like their last one. But, you know, again, maybe a little bit more controlled. Well, I mean, at least for a Meshuggah, that is. And Conditional Healing does have like a really cool tapping intro that kind of blends into a really nasty tremolo riff on there. But a lot of this kind of labors big, chuggy breakdowns and dissonant lead melodies on top. There are some really cool leads on here, but for the most part, it's sort of a steady drone of like just ambience in the background. It's almost kind of like a dull hum that's in the back of every track, except for maybe the parts where they isolate it just so Joe can belt out the line of the song and the breakdown kicks in. Because again, you still have a lot of deathcore tropes on here. So while this album is definitely a little bit more removed in some aspects from the bulk of deathcore, it is still very much a deathcore album, which is neither good nor bad. Again, I'm not the biggest deathcore fan, but there is deathcore that I do like. And honestly, they do it pretty well on here. Now, an issue I ran into here was kind of the flow of the album. The first 5 tracks I thought were really cool because they really separated themselves. You had Far From Heaven and Two Towers in there, which really set themselves apart from the other tracks, you know, Pandora being a almost melodic death metal, melodic deathcore, whatever you want to call it, kind of thrashy barn burner to start. And then a song like In Shadows, which is just a slow, brooding, lumbering deathcore beatdown. Like that has just pure deathcore heaviness across the board. I have to say the vocals on that one are particularly sick. Great alternating between high screams and really low growls. That song is just pure heavy. Now, after Two Towers, it kind of hits cruise control. Like they kind of start laboring more just breakdown oriented stuff, which is cool, but not much of it stood out. Outside of the stuff that reminded me of Meshuggah, which, you know, that's really cool too, the stuff in there kind of felt a little stale versus how it opened. The next 4 tracks really didn't do much for me other than them being extraordinarily heavy, which, you know, that's kind of what you're supposed to do if you're in a metal band anyway. But I didn't think they were necessarily bad, I just didn't think they were very interesting. Like, it kind of, you know, started going to the well a little bit too much. Like, all the deathcore tropes, like, of course, big vocal shout before the big breakdown, and of course, more breakdown-oriented stuff, which, you know, that's kind of what I expect anyway. But when you tease stuff that is definitely outside of that and also executed really well, you kind of want to hear more of that. But I have to say, the last track, The Man That Was Not, which I brought up before, shows off a myriad of different dynamics that I thought were really cool. A very soft, clean opening, and it builds well. It builds tension. It has a kind of sorrowful feel to it, and the melodies are absolutely crushing on this song. Like, this is, I guess, their kind of version of an epic. I mean, it feels pretty epic. It's over 6 minutes, which, you know, that puts it into longer song territory, but it is really driven by awesome riffs, great hooks, and a really cool flow to the song. And honestly, after listening to that and Two Towers and Far From Heaven, again, these songs really stand out on the album. This kind of feels like them testing the waters a little bit. Like, these songs are clearly a lot different than the standard fare on here, which even the standard fare, there's some variety on it, but a lot of it kind of just, you know, sticks to, you know, just solid deathcore. Not bad, but not as imaginative as those 3 songs. And I kind of wonder if this is actually what the future holds for this band, because they're doing this sound really well, but at the same time, it is kind of far removed from what they usually do. Now, there are still elements, like, of course, breakdowns and, you know, the big deathcore vocals, but it's definitely more moody, more atmospheric, and maybe even bordering on proggy just in terms of the song structure. So there was a part of me that kind of felt like the other songs were just a little bit safer while these stood out as the more adventurous ones. But on the other hand, again, Far From Heaven is so much a Gojira song in spirit that, you know, you can almost argue there's a little bit of worship and tribute going on too. Which isn't a bad thing. You're worshiping and tributing a good band, and honestly, you pulled it off and threw in your elements too, and it's a fucking catchy song. It's got a massive hook. Overall, this was a pretty interesting release. I kind of expected a little bit of the last album to show up, and it did, but I also heard some different stuff, and I was pretty pleased with this. So overall, I'm gonna give this 3 stars. I think this is a good album. It's just kind of, I don't know, like the flow of it is kind of odd. The fact that they were willing to experiment so much on certain songs and then kind of just go to the well on others, especially when they did those other songs really well, I don't know, it kind of left me desiring more of this more broad sound overall. I think that Sea of Tragic Beasts was maybe a little bit more cohesive. They kind of had one uniform sound versus this one having kind of several sounds in there kind of blending together, which made Sea of Tragic Beasts possibly better in some realm. But I still think this is really good. I still think you should check it out. I do like the fact that this band is growing and expanding their sound, but I kind of want to see them push the sound that they're doing on Two Towers and The Man That I Was Not a little bit more, because I think there's more potential for growth there. Overall though, if you're a deathcore fan, I think you'll probably enjoy this. And if you're also a fan of stuff like Rivers of Nile and Gojira, I definitely think you'll find some stuff on here worth checking out. It will be interesting to see what the future holds for this band, because they're kind of at a point where I think they can continue to grow in terms of that newer sound they're approaching. But at the same time, they have a longtime fan base that loves deathcore, so I don't know, what do they do here? This is a very interesting position they're in right now, and I am definitely curious to see what they do next. So if you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up, and if you are new to the channel, subscribe, because we do stuff like this all the time. We are also on Patreon. If you'd like to help us out there, there'll be a link down below. We will hopefully be making an announcement about shirts here relatively soon. I put in the order. The people making them are going to contact me, and I have to approve designs. I sound so official right now. It's amazing. But once we actually have them in hand, we are going to do an announcement video and probably a giveaway as well. And yes, it'll probably be a shirt, but it'll also probably be something else, because we're almost at 10,000 subscribers, and that's fucking remarkable. And thank you. Thank you all once again. I'm going to keep doing that. It's probably going to get annoying. You're like, oh shit, here comes the part in the video where he fucking thanks us to death. Oh, shut up. Well, I'm not going to quit doing it. So thank you, and we will catch you later.